Ted? What are you doing?
Beholding the beholders.
Oh, that works out, because today we're going to be talking about D&D Cartoon, Episode 2, Eye of the Beholder. Welcome to Nerdarchy, for nerds, by nerds. I'm Nerdarchist Dave, and as usual, I'm hanging out with this nerd.
Nerdarchist Ted.
Hey, maybe it's your first time hanging out in Ted's basement. Nerdarchy is a place where we like to talk about news, views, and homebrews for 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. Sometimes we even talk about other role-playing games.
So if you don't want to miss a single video, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and attune to that notification bell.
Alright, so let's jump into it. We are on the second episode of the first season of Dungeons & Dragons, the cartoon, Eye of the Beholder. Now, we're going to do our normal breakdown where we take a look at the episode and see what can we learn from watching this cartoon to help us be better at playing the game of Dungeons & Dragons.
Absolutely. So we're not going to get into, who different characters are. We're going to talk briefly about the plot and then talk about little snippets of things that are going on. We know that the players, the characters are still trying to make it back to the real world, to their home. And in this one, the DM gives them, hey, you go over there and you can get home.
Yeah, so it kind of starts off with the overarching plot of, as always, the campaign is Get Home. They're traveling through this really hot, sweltering region where there's no shade, and, they haven't seen the Dungeon Master for days, which, almost on cue he always pops up, but not before a couple of random encounters.
First thing is, while they're sitting there complaining and essentially doing some pretty cool, inter-party role-playing, which I always like to see happening, but they wind up...
Real quick, because you mentioned inter-party role-playing, what was going on was there was actually an exchange of character backstory, pretty much.
And it was humorous as, Eric was, talking about exploring his backyard.
Being on safari, yeah.
It was quite humorous. But while that's happening, Uni winds up, digging in the dirt and somehow unearthing a massive scorpion.
Yeah, it's not even like the giant scorpion from the Monster Manual in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons. No way, because this thing has to be at least huge by my estimation.
I would agree.
So in the meantime, an NPC overhears what's going on and gets scared. He's frightened. The kids are kind of running off for safety. Well, this NPC runs into another cave and has his own random encounter with nothing less than a blue dragon.
So the blue dragon's coming out, blasting, lightning all over the place, and the scorpion and the blue dragon wind up standing off, and the blue dragon drives the scorpion off and chases it.
Yes. So there's like a little takeaway that I would like to bring up from just this little interaction. Yeah. And that is the idea of clever players using monsters against each other in order to kind of solve their problems. Now, granted, this NPC wasn't that clever and that wasn't their intent. It just happened to work that way. But I feel like a lot of like old school Dungeons and Dragons, a lot of this kind of stuff would kind of come up.
Most times you see campaigns today where DMs are not throwing out random encounters and not throwing out random encounters that are far above the player's weight class. It's the concept of, if I put out an encounter, then the players are expected, I should be able to handle this. And it's an old school thought of, that's not the way the world works. Sometimes you are out of your league and you have to either run away or deal with the consequences of your actions.
Yeah, sometimes you get a goblin or a kobold. Other times you get a scorpion the size of a barn, and then a blue dragon shows up. It's just the way it is. So from there, they talk to the NPC, there's an interaction, and then the NPC goes their own way. And so that's when...
Sir John.
Yeah, Sir John. And then that's when Dungeon Master shows up shortly after that.
He gives them the renewed quest, tells them to go off in this direction. And there winds up being a couple of riddles that wind up, being entered into it. And, I think riddles have been a big component of D&D in the early days. Every table is different, but it's something that when you've been gaming as long as we have, most of the gaming appropriate riddles that we know of or we've used, everybody knows the answers to. So it's like, you got to think outside the box to come up with new riddles.
Right, maybe modernize them a little bit. So, one of the riddles is sometimes to go forward, you have to first look back. And the other one is, in the beauty is in the eye of the beholder, which is going to be a clue for later on. And speaking of beholder, the quest that he kind of gives them is like, oh, I found a portal to to home, but it's guarded by a beholder. And they're like, oh, we just have to get by this beholder. He's like, no,
you got to defeat it.
You have to defeat it. I guess it's Diana. It's like, oh, so we have to go meet this beholder if we get home. And Dungeon no, you have to defeat it. They do a lot of rhyming in there, so that's part of it.
It's amusing the fact that they're looking to take in a lot of cases so many iconic symbols of D&D, and like we're gonna just keep this thrust into the episode so that like literally episode 2 their characters are low level and you're going up against a freaking beholder.
It's a pushover after Tiamat. Well, that's a good point too. And also I'd like to point out like how simplistic things were, back then as well, because the cartoon kind of illustrates this. And the name of the valley is Valley of the Beholder. Super original. But straight to the point, there's a valley, there's a beholder, boom.
It might have had a former name, but the players didn't inquire further. Maybe they failed their history checks.
So now they get the idea that they need Sir John, because they're like, oh, we have to look back to go forward. We just met this guy. He went the other direction. Then we learn a little bit about the NPC as viewers, which you really wouldn't know as a player, so we don't need to get into that very much. They suffer another random encounter in this mushroom forest before they can find Sir John. And actually, I meant to look up before we started this video if that was actually a D&D monster. It's these evil humanoid snails, and they were pretty cool.
I was actually really impressed with the snail monsters, and I really want to make not only them but like their gear, because they had like these grapple vines that they were using.
I think they were shooting them out of their stalks.
Yeah,
they had antenna or eye stalks, except for they had regular eyes too. But out of the I wouldn't call them eye stalks, but I don't think they had eyes, so maybe antenna, they would shoot the goop out of those.
So I think these are monsters that definitely need to be made. We didn't see them, pull into their shells, but that could totally be a thing. I think it could be a lot of fun to go down that road.
So there's some takeaways here. One, they do eventually end up overwhelming the party and capturing them, right? So it just illustrates so you can defeat the party without killing them. It doesn't have to be to the death. I mean, obviously this is a kid's cartoon, so they weren't going to do that anyway. But I mean, we can still take away from it and extrapolate the fact that, oh, well, the encounter's going poorly for the adventurers. Let's have them get captured instead. In this particular case, one of them gets away, the beast companion Uni, and Uni goes to seek help.
So Uni winds up, encountering Sir John, who is on the mission of, I've got to do something brave. I've got to do something brave. With encouragement, he winds up, coming to the aid of the party.
Yes, so he agrees to lead them to the Valley of the Beholder. Initially, he's a little resistant to do such a thing, and he's not going to do it. But then the party's arch nemesis shows up,
Venger,
behind scenes, and has imprisoned Sir John's son. So now he's going to be strong-armed into doing it. So Venger says, lead them there and then leave them there. And then once they are destroyed by the beholder, I will have their magic items.
So, here's something where you can take away, like, okay, let's create an NPC. Let's build
tension.
Interest, tension, caring for this NPC, and then now we're going to have them become a pawn, a plot element of your big bad. And this is something that you've got the ability to do behind the screen. You get to pull all the puppet strings and make all the things happen. And literally, I'm going out to go to the bathroom, get a drink, go hunting, I'm stepping away for some quiet, whatever have you. And in that moment, Big Bad shows up and has a quick conversation.
And also there's clues that this NPC isn't actually everything he says to be. Eric is a bit of the cynic of the group, and he's calling it out right away the whole time. The rest of our adventures are more happy-go-lucky and trusting. They're not trying to hear it. But, there is definitely clues as well as like, hey, why don't you guys make the plans and I'll scout?
So yeah, it's pretty amusing, and with veteran gamers, there might not be buying some of this stuff, so you do have to be a little bit careful if you're going to do some of the stuff that winds up happening in this.
Or maybe not careful, but more thoughtful
Yeah.
on how you do it. So with that, they do get led to the Beholder. They encounter the Beholder, and just as they're getting ready to meet up with the Beholder, Sir John's like, I'm out. I did what I said I was going to do. You guys are going to have to fight it on your own, fulfilling his deal with Venger, and he goes off to meet with Venger, who gives him his son back. And also, for this NPC, it wasn't like he rolled right over either. Like, he's got character flaws, but he really did not want to betray the kids and the adventuring party. But once his son was in jeopardy, then he really had no choice, and he did agree to do it. But once he got his son back, he did decide to basically join the fray after the party was already doing very poorly.
So, when they actually do come up against the Beholder, the Beholder was, obviously operating on a different set of stats than what we have in the 5th edition Monster Manual, because he was firing lasers and, didn't have a variety of effects on his eye stalks, individually. The eye stalks were basically doing whatever the Beholder wanted.
Yeah, there's a lot of things going on, but before we go any further, let's behold our sponsor for this video, D&D Beyond.
So D&D Beyond is, a great app that you can be able to, use for a variety of purposes, whether you want to make characters, research, spells, class abilities, feats. You can dive into all kinds of great stuff. I like playing around with it, whether I'm making unique stuff, new stuff to use in my game, or whether I'm looking to, just augment my characters that are already there.
Hey, maybe you want to recreate the Beholder from that D&D cartoon. All you have to do is import the stats from a regular Beholder and copy them, and then change the things that you need to change in order to make it more like the one in the cartoon. That is just one of the many features you can use over on D&D Beyond.
You can check out all of the great articles, videos, and free content that's in the SRD, and check out D&D Beyond.
There will be a link in the description. All right, yeah, so you mentioned this Beholder was doing some different things. It was shooting its laser beams or eye rays, and lava was erupting in from the ground, basically like a blast or force effect. There was also, more ensnaring goo vines.
Similar to what the snail folk did.
Yeah, they were definitely on that kick. They're like, we already paid for this animation. We might as well get the most out of it. I don't know. But, Sir John, he enters the fray, jumps off of a cliff. One of his excuses to try and leave earlier was he left his shield back in the village, so he was going to go get it. But thankfully, Presto was able to conjure him a shield to use.
Yeah.
Some of us may recognize that from modern times as a trash can lid. It did not hold up very good through the battle. It was good for like a shot or two. He ends up getting ensnared, but he actually does a little bit better than the rest of the adventurers because he's able to get his limbs free. And then they're reminded of the riddle from earlier. And they use beauty to defeat the Beholder.
Diana wound up picking a flower as a way of, saying thank you, and, pinned it or put it on Sir John. Sir John, plucked the flower at the player's behest and shoved it into the eye of the Beholder. And, that
turns out he had a terrible allergy to flowers and pollen.
So that winds up basically having him fizzle and melt, and a pile of green goo wound up seeping down into a chasm.
Yeah, so there is a takeaway here, right? And that is the idea that there might be alternate ways to defeat a monster other than just physically beating it. Perhaps you want to use a monster who's far more powerful than the players, and there's no way they're going to be able to whittle down its hit points or its defenses. Its offensive capabilities are just too strong. But you build an Achilles heel into this particular monster, making it maybe a little bit more unique than what you're normally doing. And, you may have a set method for destroying it. There may be different things. You may be like, what? There's going to be other ways to destroy it. I'm not even going to make them up. I'll see what my players come up with. And, you plant the seeds early on in the venture and do some foreshadowing and give them the opportunity to later on try and figure out what it is they can do to defeat this monster, then other than just beating it down or pummeling it into submission.
I like the idea of saying, I'm going to give out a clue and then leave it open-ended and see what the players come up with. And if they fail to come up with something, well, I'm going to have to think on my feet and be able to, not have them die, or just kill them, however you will. But if they come up with something that seems, unique and interesting, and be like, oh, I really like this idea, I'm going to run with it, and that winds up becoming the weakness. I like that idea.
Yeah, and in the earlier editions of the game, and I think the way the game played earlier, GMs might do stuff like that, but not in that way. They would come up with a specific way, and this is how you do it. This is the only way you do it. That was really common in games. I think that the open-ended and being able to adapt on the fly is more of a modern way of playing the game. Because, like DMs, in the early days of the game, it seemed like DMs were a lot more antagonistic towards their players. But even still, they had like set rules that they would follow. Like literally, it would have been, you can only defeat it by shoving that flower in the eye. Nothing you could come up with was going to do it. But like the more modern style, I think, in the way we play nowadays, it's like, you know what? That sounds pretty cool. I'll go with that. And even though maybe it wasn't something you initially thought of.
And I do like that mindset. And if you happen to have, veteran players, if you happen to have people who are very, quick thinking, you can have a lot of fun and interesting, games by putting out vague solutions and seeing what they come up with.
So now the story progresses, right, to the point where the Beholder has been defeated. The portal has opened with the defeat of the Guardian. Mm-hmm. They're all standing on the brink of the portal, ready to go through. There's a little bit of delay because they can't take their beast companion with them, the unicorn. It doesn't belong in the real world. But in the meantime, the portal is closing, and Venger has showed up to enact vengeance upon Sir John.
Wait. Venger enacts vengeance? That just doesn't seem right.
I know. He wants to punish Sir John for not fully betraying the adventurers, and they have a choice. They can either complete their quest, their campaign arc, which was to get home, or they can help this NPC who has helped them.
So this is a great thing, that we can take away, is tempting your players. It is awesome to be able to say, here's that thing that you want. Magic item, end quest, what have you. But in order to get it, something bad has to happen. And it could be, hey, that beloved NPC has to die, or, some other detrimental effect. Are you willing to accept that? And, in this case, we look at the specific of example, something bad is going to happen to Sir John. He could be taken prisoner, he could be killed, and they can go on their way. They can go home, or they can stand up to Venger again and, save this NPC's life at the risk of not fulfilling their mission.
And also, in addition to that, they made the right decision to be heroes and not to be shitty people and just look out for themselves. So they fight off Venger, sort of. Something happens that actually drives him off, but they don't know what it is, and neither do we. They don't really ever show it. I mean, we all kind of just assume it was Dungeon Master. Mm-hmm. But it's also a great point for foreshadowing. Like, you could do that in your game and have something happen, and the players don't understand what happened and don't know about it. So it could come. So even if they don't do anything right then, maybe it'll come up later on in the game. So that's another great takeaway, I think.
Well, the other thing is that's the end of the episode. So you could literally leave off so that, your next session starts off with you finding out that, maybe Venger has, another enemy, and thus you might have another ally that you could start off the next session with. Is this a fight? Is this a conversation? You don't really know what's there. It could go either way.
Yeah, essentially a cliffhanger.
There you go.
Right, and when we get to episode 3 of the cartoon, who knows what happened? Spoilers, I guess, but I mean we've watched these before when we were kids, but it's been a lot of years, so a lot of this stuff is kind of fresh for me.
Yeah, it's been a long time. I mean, maybe not as long as you, because I bought the DVD, many years ago, but it's one of those things that is like, all right, I don't really remember much, if anything, from watching it previously, and we're watching this episode by episode. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And speaking of DVDs, there will be a link to Amazon, so you could pick up your own DVD if you wanted to watch it at your leisure as well. I think that nicely wraps up episode 2. Let us know what you think. Eye of the Beholder, D&D Cartoon. Did you watch it? You're going to watch it. What did you take away from that adventure? Are there any things you're going to put in your game? We can talk about it down in the comments below. While you're at it, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.
On your way down there, don't forget to stop by the description and check out that link to D&D Beyond.
So until next time,
Stay nerdy.